Welcome to How the Song Came to Be, where soulful songwriters share the stories behind their songs, as well as tools and creative practices you can use to bring your best songs or other creative works to life. I'm Anneheaton, your host.
So I'm just always I feel like so indebted to the work of other artists because I know like their work is kind of like an oxygen mask to me, and that it revives me the same way spending time, in the forest or by a lake, which are like new things for me that I didn't really have those as part of my daily life in Brooklyn. But that replenishes me.
Welcome, songwriters. I'm Anneheaton, your host and founder of Soul Song School. Our guest today is writer, filmmaker, and gatherer jenlee. Jenlee is the director and producer of two feature-length documentaries, Indie Kindred and Bright Lights. She is a GrandSLAM storytelling champion. Her autobiographical stories have been featured on the Peabody award-winning Moth radio hour. Her resources for artists and makers worldwide include the 10 Letters Project, Movies for Makers, and the Gathering Project. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be with you.
Thank you so much for being here. I want to briefly frame for the songwriters and other creative souls listening one of the reasons that I'm so happy that you're willing to be with us today. I feel like you're kind of like a mom of the creative process and the way you're able to articulate and are so transparent about your process. So if you have doubts, you share those. If you're having a dry spell or if you're really diving in and leaving your house messy, or like if you are confused about where you're going, but you have a curiosity and you're just following that. And I feel like in you sharing those details, we as other creative folk feel less alone. And not only that, you give us tools to like dialogue with ourselves, more tools. And just with some of the songwriters I meet, there can be a tendency when you get stuck, like I've been working on this song and now I don't know where it's going, like forget it. Like there can be a tendency to go into that negative self-talk, which may just be part of the process and that's fine. But I feel like your work, for me, and I think for other people, is like an invitation to reframe that moment. If you hit an obstacle, reframe that moment as maybe like an invitation from your creative process or your soul to look at it differently, or take a break, or go deeper, or ask yourself why you're stuck, or maybe engage in more self-care. And so that's one of the reasons I'm so happy that you're here to talk with us. So thank you.
Yes, of course.
So I'd love to start out with the question that I ask everyone, which is, how and why did you become a maker?
I feel like it's something I haven't thought about in a while, like the beginning, But I think maybe the simplest version of the story is that I always wanted to be a maker when I was really young. When you're that age where you kind of think anything is possible. And I think that's what I always dreamed of, up until the moment where I started talking to myself about what was not possible, or I definitely had a moment where I was like, why bother? Somebody else has already done it, and they've probably done it better than you. So maybe work on a cure for cancer or something. So I did that. I kind of switched gears.
Yeah.
And had, decades of another life. And it was after I became a mom, and I was kind of hitting the wall in what I was doing professionally and trying to figure it out, and taking some courses and just trying to figure out, like, why am I kind of stuck at this level? And I started kind of uncovering all these memories from my earlier years and thinking, maybe I'm stuck in what I'm doing because I don't love it. And because there's this other thing that's been with me, like, as long as I can remember. And maybe that's worth listening to now. And so I think that just really started me on kind of a gradual transition that I think most of us go through, where we start to kind of overlap because we're just experimenting and stretching into something a little bit. And then as we gain confidence and that grows, then we can taper off, from those older roles or those past identities. And, my oldest daughter's 13 now. So
Wow.
It's been about that long that I've been doing creative work, and really about a decade since I've been doing it pretty exclusively.
Yeah. And what did you do before?
I was in college, and then I actually, after college, went into what was for me the family visit, or the family business, which was Mary Kay Beauty Consultants.
Oh, okay.
So I was like an entrepreneur for like 8 years.
Okay.
Which is really interesting. And even now I'm like, thank God they taught me how to do my taxes as an independent person.
Sure.
It's like funny now to be like an independent artist and be like pulling back on so many of those skills about how to work for yourself and stay organized and kind of like run structures for it.
Yeah, that's important. As a child, what were some of the things that you found yourself making that then later you remembered?
I think the main thing was I loved Nancy Drew books, and I wanted to like be the next Carolyn Keene. And I didn't know that wasn't a real person, that was like, 100 women writing under that pen name. But I really wanted to be a writer, and I loved poetry. I wanted to be a poet. I remember having this chalkboard in my bedroom and drawing, like, just spending hours and hours drawing like fashion in chalk, and my carpet being just like covered in chalk from when you'd erase it and the powder would fall down.
Yeah, yeah.
And, there were a lot of things, and I didn't get to do them all. Like, I learned to play piano, and I always wanted to learn how to play jazz because that's what I loved. And everywhere I went, there was never anyone who could teach me that. So instead, I learned classical piano, which, I probably don't have to like point out too hard is like not the same. And I had a teacher in college who kind of taught me how to fake it a little bit, but and even lately, even that's one thing that's on my mind, because I think like 6 months ago I thought, I could probably go on YouTube and I could probably teach myself, because the truth is I've taught myself most things. And but I've recently moved over an ocean, and my family's relocated to Sweden, and my piano was one of the things I didn't get to bring with me. So I'm kind of in a gap in between seasons there, but even that's one thing where I've thought it's not too late. I could go back and pick that up. And I live in this like sweet little Swedish village now, and they have like a jazz and blues club.
Oh, wow.
They have like little groups that play, and I'm like, probably the only one under the age of 50, but they're like delighted to have someone come to the shows. So I don't know, maybe even that I'll go back and pick up some in some small way.
Well, I love that idea of like being willing to learn new stuff.
Yeah.
And I feel like you do that all the time. And I'm wondering, one of the things I want to ask you, like when you realized after, selling Mary Kay, like that you really wanted to go back to your creative self as a child, how did you talk to yourself about that? Or how did you, I know for me, like if I'm scared to do something, I don't know if you were scared to do something, but two things happen. Like if the pain of not doing it outweighs the fear, then I will do it. Like, so if I'm like, oh, I'm so happy, then I'll be like, okay, I'll do the thing that scares me, like go play the show. Or sometimes I have to trick myself. Like if I'm, like when my kids were first born, I didn't want to leave them. So I'd say like, okay, just go to the airport, and if you decide once you get to the airport that you want to come home, you can. So I would just like chunk it down and stuff. So for you,
I still do that.
I do that every day. No.
Just walk to your desk. Just write one paragraph all the time. It's true. It's a really good method. And man, there's so many things I could tell you. I tried everything at the beginning. I think my first medium that I came through was through writing, and I just had this like throwing spaghetti on the wall approach where I just didn't know what I could do or what I was good at. So I just was like, I'll just write a novel, and then I'll write a blog and essays. I just had no idea what I was doing. And I remember a conversation I had with my uncle, he was an English teacher, and he also taught film studies. And I remember one night just sitting with him on the couch and being like, am I just like crazy? Like, because there's this thing I think where you think, is this just nuts? Because like, how many people are trying to do this versus like how many actual slots are there in the world for ways that feel like it actually takes off or becomes a thing that you feel validated spending your time on. And I remember him saying like a couple things to me. He told me the story of a friend of his who had been like a friend and colleague like all these years. And my uncle had taught English, but he hadn't spent that much time writing himself personally, but his colleague was just like writing all the time and having this, like kind of low level success. But he said, he just writes because I think he has to. And I think if you have to, you just have to. And then he was like, this was like 10 years ago. And he said, and I think the only sure thing is Oprah, like unless Oprah picks up your book, like who knows? And we were laughing about that. But I think about that a lot lately. I think because I'm in this kind of crossroads moment where my life is changing so dramatically, and I'm trying to wrap up projects that I have in motion, but also thinking like what comes next for me, and having people make me a lot of different offers. Like, you could do this for a job or that for a job, And I was thinking the other day, I wanted to tell you the story. I was thinking the other day about how I was walking out to the room where I write now, and we have these spiders, like massive spiders, like poisonous spiders, which they never really made me that squeamish, but I should probably learn like which ones are poisonous now. But it was morning and the light was coming through, and there was just this massive spider web in a corner of this building. And I was watching, like a bug had gotten caught, and the spider like ran down and started wrapping it up. Mm-hmm. And later I was inside, I was at my desk, and I was writing and just feeling this moment where I was like, what do I even do? And I feel like for people who have lots of different mediums or different expressions, it can get really confusing. I think it's easier for people who are just like, I'm a writer, but I've done lots of different mediums, and I was like, how do I even explain to people what I do, and why do I feel so just like generally unemployable and things like this, right? And I thought about that spider that I'd seen, and I thought, the thing is I feel like I'm built like this. Like on the inside, I've got this web, and things get stuck in it. Like things that happen to me, other people's work that I see that inspires me, people I love. Like, you're going through life and these things just get like caught in this web. And then there's something in me that spins it into something, But instead of like using it for food, like at some point in time, I have to just like pull it out of me. And maybe it's like a piece of writing, and maybe it's a film, and maybe it's an event. But something in me just like, I can't not catch the things. Mm-hmm. And I know I can't leave them inside of me and be well. Like, I just have to get it out. And there's something about that feels like so compulsive to me, that it feels animalistic. Like I'm just that kind of creature. Mm-hmm. And the truth is, I know some people are like, everyone's creative, blah, 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 right? That's not what I'm talking about. But I want to say, like, not everyone is this kind of creature. Like, I can look around my family of origin for hard confirmation. Like, not everyone is like walking through life and catching everything in this web and spinning it into something they have to pull out of them. But I think if you are, you know it. And I think if you want to be well, you'll find a way to do what you do, you know? Does that make sense?
I love the way that you explained that. I love the visual aspect of it because it will stay with me. I know for me, like, I've never thought of it quite like that, but I really relate to that. I think if I ask myself how I think of it in this moment, I think of it almost like, sometimes I feel like I'm haunted by something unknown.
Yeah.
And this is something I wanted to ask you about. Like, I feel like, and at some point, it's so present, and it comes as like a feeling or something that I have to look at it and go into it. And it won't be ignored. You know, it will, like, I mean, I've had something like that with me the last several years every morning when I wake up, and I'm like, what are you, you know? So to me, it's almost like a haunting, or like missing a person that I don't know who it is. Like, sometimes I feel like it's like, did I have a sister and like she died and I have like amnesia or something? Like, there's like this strong presence and I don't know what it is. And maybe I'll discover what it is once I start writing about it. But that's sort of how, I mean, there are other things like, I mean, I work with a lot of songwriters and a lot of actually people who don't even consider themselves songwriters who have a story to tell, you know, and they're like, I need to like get this story out. But you're right. They might not feel the need to get stories out all the time or feel this thing is they're catching all this stuff. So I love that.
Yeah. And I wish I have that sense of being haunted too. And I feel like most things I've made have just chased me down and worn me down until I said yes to them. And I feel like that's a bad news thing to say to people. Like, feels like bad news when it's happening to me. I think because the things I care about the most scare me so much. And I know what it's going to cost me or ask of me. And I try like to find any way I can to like wriggle out of it and be like, go find someone else, you know? But they don't leave me alone. And so I feel like everything I make is actually just my only attempt at having peace. Being like, let me go.
It's good news in the sense, maybe, or to me, I interpret it this way, as like, it takes away that question, am I crazy? There's only so many slots for this, you know, that sort of thinking of it on this like worldly level. Whereas if it's just something that's coming for you, you know what I mean? Like, I'm coming for jenlee, like, then, you know, like, and you don't, you know, having less of a choice in the matter might be bad news, but it might be good news, because then you don't have to make some sort of cerebral decision on whether.
Yeah. And at some point I realized like no one else is coming. Like, no one's going to make this thing. No one's going to tell this story. No one else has caught this in their web. They're catching other things. Like, this is just you. And if it's not you, then it's going to go unmade, you know? And it's going to go unsaid. And I think that's the point where I usually call Uncle and I'm like, fine. All right, you know? It's real sexy, you know? Like,
oh my gosh.
Oh, I'm just so inspired. Usually I'm like kicking and screaming, being like, don't make me do it. But I'm usually glad I did, and I'm always just thinking like, oh, if one person is glad I made this, that's enough, you know?
Yeah.
And it's not like my dream to like be on the shelves of Target or something, you know?
Yeah.
I think my dream is just to have peace and to be well in my body and to know I'm not like holding anything in me that's going to like metastasize and make me sick, you know. That's what I'm doing now. It's just trying to pull it all out.
Yeah. I want to know like more about what's coming out, but I'm also thinking something else that strikes me. I was like a couple of weeks ago, where was I? I was like on Lake Erie, like listening to the lake, the waves. And I was struck by because sometimes I think people are like, oh, you're a filmmaker, you're living your dream, right? So there's like this idea that it's like this dream, and on some levels it can be, and it is sometimes to make manifest something that you love. But as I was listening to the waves, I was like, oh, it's like both. It's like, well, the Christian tradition, it's like your cross and your dream. Like it's the same thing. Like it's kind of like when you said, what will this take out of me? Like sometimes I feel like that when I'm making a record, I'm like, wow, am I really going to do this? Like, what will it do to me? Like, I know on the other side I will have grown, but it's like giving birth or having a kid, you know?
Yeah.
It's not to be taken lightly.
Yeah, you really spend something that's not easily replenished. You know? I think about that a lot.
Do you ever feel like your creative process, if you're writing or making things, or maybe you're getting a story ready to do storytelling or any of your work, that the process can be replenishing? Or does it always feel like a spending?
That's a good question. I don't know if it ever feels replenishing to me. I think sometimes it feels joyful, and sometimes it feels like ease. I know when I'm with my friends, it feels like play, like in that sweetest, purest version, like when you were children and you got lost in the game and like time disappeared and you were like in your own imaginary world together. You know, that's kind of my ideal moment, is to be lost in it.
Yeah.
But I don't think that refills me. I think even when I'm in those moments, I'm spending and I just can't feel it. And I feel like I have to just keep a really steady diet of the things that do replenish me, which
What
is
are
like
those things?
sleep and nature and the work of other artists. And I feel like, you know, especially these last few months when I get when I get super lost in like the wordless space, like music is really something that gets me through. So I'm just always I feel like so indebted to the work of other artists, because I know like their work is kind of like an oxygen mask to me, you know, and that it revives me the same way spending time, you know, in the forest or by a lake, which are like new things for me that I didn't really have those as part of my daily life in Brooklyn. But that replenishes me. Togetherness, like friendship and community.
Yeah.
Totally brings me back to life. And all those things I just feel like are kind of like, and I'm in a moment now where I kind of feel like I'm a patient on life support and I've got all my different things like hooked up to me to be like, I just need it all. I need the lunch with a friend, and I need the walk through the lake, and I need the nap, and I need the like documentary about the Foo Fighters, and I need the song that I'm into like on repeat. You know, those things are refueling me. And
I just want to highlight that for anyone listening, just that, I mean, you could call that self-care, but just all the things that are filling you up. If you are someone that doesn't necessarily feel filled up in your making, to I hate saying the word refuel, but because soon we'll be on electric cars, but to replenish.
Yeah.
And all of those things. I feel like a really good conversation is and naps. I'm all about naps. If I can get a nap. I used to feel like I could write in my nap. Like if I didn't know
Yes.
what I wanted to say, like I
sleep it out.
Yeah, I just would like take a nap and then I get up and like write the little letter or
Yeah.
whatever. Which
I
is
think that we resist doing those things because they don't look outwardly productive. And we love to like be able to have something to show for our time, like a checked off checklist or something, to-do list. But they're actually shortcuts, you know? And I think that's why I leave so much space in my life for things like friendship and conversation and togetherness, you know, things that maybe other people don't leave as much time for, is because I don't think like that's time away from my work. I'm like, no, that's the part where I find the shortcut through the forest and I get there faster, you know?
Yeah.
So I think about it like that.
Absolutely.
But it's hard. I'm like addicted to being productive. So I really have to talk myself through that stuff and be like, it's fine.
How do you talk yourself? Like, what do you say?
Even today, even before I was talking to you, I like really had to rest to like conserve my energy. Like this is late in my day, you know?
Yeah.
And I just had to tell myself like, it's okay. If you do this well, tomorrow you'll be back.
Yeah.
Or you're going to resist and fight it. And it's going to be like days before you're okay again, you know?
Yeah. I feel like I resist so many things. Yeah. And what do I want to say? Yeah, it's like I feel like I'm presented with a choice. I can like labor over something, or I can get in a really great state of mind and take a walk in the forest or call a friend or just say whatever you feel like working on, Anne, that's what you get to do for the next 2 hours, like whatever.
Yes.
You know, not the thing that's due, you know, and then suddenly it just comes. And in that moment, I'm like, wow, this is so easy. Like I could have labored over this, but instead I decided to just like create, happy is not the right word, but just like almost like a soulful, loving space. And then it was just like here, you know?
Yeah. I think I spent years having to like rework my paradigm for how creative work gets done. Because I think I was raised with this kind of idea of traditional work where more time plus more effort gets more results.
Mm-hmm.
And I just found with creative work that equation doesn't hold. And like throwing more time and effort at it is not the way to get where you need to go. You know, I just got tired and the work got thin and it wasn't rich or deep.
Yeah.
So I really had to just kind of create a new paradigm for myself that was like, you know, that formula works for some types of work, but this type of work is different. And you have to learn its ecosystem and play by its rules, you know?
Yeah.
That took,
I find really that every time I go to this one dance class, this Nia dance class, I feel like something amazing happens. I leave and I get like an amazing email about something really cool I get to like teach or do, or I get a great idea. And like, yeah, I mean, and that is so, I mean, I feel like that other paradigm only works in like short bursts of like an hour. Like, ooh, I'm going to work on this for an hour. I'm going to set the time. Oh, but if I can't take that approach all day long, like.
Yeah. But I think I kept looking at my life through the lens of someone who does more of a traditional job and thinking, oh, this looks so cush. And this looks so like what you're going to like you're going to lay on the sofa with your hot water bottle on your feet and watch a documentary about Foo Fighters. And this is your work day, you know, like there's something about it that just looked so posh and like I was just eating bonbons or something. But, but the truth is, it's like what we do, it takes something different than like collecting tolls at a toll booth. Like that takes a different kind of energy than what it takes to like pull something up from like the deep places inside you and fashioning it into something that has some form that you can pass it on to someone else and that they can ingest, you know? Like that. It just takes something, and the way the mechanisms of it work are mysterious and a lot of a lot of it's kind of invisible. Like, who knows what that opens up? You just know, you start to learn yourself, and you start to learn certain things shake something loose for me.
Yes.
Like, if I find a song with like just the right kind of rhythm, I can get that thought out on paper, you know? But it's almost like a key having to turn the lock.
Right.
And everyone's a little different, and I think it just takes some time to learn yourself. And some things are kind of universal. Like, I feel like stillness, movement, nature, friendship, like those feel pretty universal to me. Like, anyone can try those.
Stillness, nature, movement, friendship.
Yeah.
Stillness, nature, movement, friendship. Just wanted to highlight that. Sometimes I need things to be like super simple. I'll be like, I feel good. What's wrong? Oh, wait, is it stillness?
Yes, I know. I have to make checklists for myself, because when you're falling apart, you do not have your high level thinking left. You're like a child who's hungry and just like melting down.
Right.
So you have to be like, wait, when did I eat protein? How much water have I had today?
Right.
You know?
So giving yourself permission to have your work not look like work, and whether that means that you just have to be more compassionate towards yourself, or whether it means that you just don't tell other people what you're up to.
Yeah, totally.
Because maybe you can't tell everyone that you
can't tell everyone.
But, you know, for example, that you watch the Foo Fighters documentary lying on the couch for your workday, but also having that interaction, like there's another artist, you know, like awaking something in you. So you're having that interaction. Something I really want to ask you about that I've heard you talk about, you'll have to put it in your own words, but I've heard you say, this is how I interpret it, you are working on something and you don't necessarily know what it is yet, instead of like knowing what you want to make and working towards that goal. And I've been having this experience. I feel like this is where frustration comes in for me until I recognize it for what it is. I was working on a song on Monday. Like I sat down to work on a song about celebrating, because I thought, like, you know, I always think I need a few more happy songs in there because I'm so good at the other kind. And so, and my kids wrote some of it. And so it is really like a happy place. But as soon as I sat down to work on it, something else showed up, like a totally other thing. And so I was just writing, and it felt really good to be writing into and exploring something that I didn't know what it was, right? It felt so great. I don't know if you experience this, but I feel like I have like two ways of being. Like, and if I could always be in that zone, I would always be happy. It felt great, but it was an unknown zone. I didn't really know what exactly I was writing about. I didn't know what I would find. I didn't know what the form was. And so I was very happy. Then at some point, the part of me that wants to know what it is came up and was like, started to evaluate and judge and be like, does this make sense? And what is this going to be? You know, and suddenly I was in a much less happy place. So I had to walk away from it and come back to it later. But if you have anything that you want to share about, I mean, I feel like great art, it comes from the unknown, because if we're just writing about what we already know, we already know it. And I don't know, I just would love to get your thoughts on that, your stories.
Yeah, I think a lot of times it just feels like I have this like very old memory from like when I was younger and that movie came out, The Hunt for Red October. I feel like that movie is like in my psyche in some like deep way, that was about submarines during the Cold War. And I think it's because that's the first time I was introduced to this idea of like sonar and being able to like send out sonar pings and navigate with them. And that's how it feels like a lot to me. Like, it just feels like I have like some sonar and I can't quite tell what that thing is, but it's when I send out a signal, it's bouncing off and coming back at me. And so maybe I'll like circle it and try to figure out the shape of it, you know? And I think it's a lot harder of a way to make something than I think this is one thing that makes artists different from entrepreneurs. I think entrepreneurs can like start with like, what's a need and what can I make? And then they work their way backwards with the end result in mind. But I feel like with artistry, there's this way where, because it's something you're pulling out of you or something mysterious, it's like coalescing around you, that it's a lot more, I don't know, it's like you're finding your way in the dark. And I think I've just found a way to find other people who don't mind that feeling, who trust me maybe to know I'll find my way through it. Mm-hmm. This last project I've been working on, I'm working on my third film now. And it's been, these things, if I look back in my journals, sometimes they go back years. And then they still at times feel like it just occurred to me. I look back and I'm like, no, some piece of that's been haunting me, like we were saying before, for a long time. But I just had this feeling like, I don't know, like might be a film and it might be like a website and it might be like a community or a project. I just didn't know. Mm-hmm. But I felt like I was getting certain pieces of it. Like I felt like I was thinking of people who were meant to be part of it, and I didn't know what it was. And so I just started reaching out to them and saying, I don't really know what this is. It's like we're going to build the boat as we go. And are you interested, or do you hear anything in this that might be a fit for you? And I was just really lucky that people were like, yes, I'm in. It doesn't matter what it is or what it turns into. And then it would just take shape a little bit. And a couple of those people turned into like producers. Like I've never had people help produce a film with me. And suddenly I had people helping with that. And I had, just like, I just felt this team kind of being formed around me. And it just kept morphing and morphing and morphing. And then it's like, at some point you're like, okay, here's the film. And we try maybe something out. Maybe it's a community, and maybe that was a short-term project, or maybe it's something we come back to. I don't know. But I think it looks like that a lot. And I just, it was after the first film, after I did Indie Kindred, that I was doing a Q&A someplace. It was in the Outer Banks, and Jonathan Brooke was there with me. And someone else from the film, and we were doing this Q&A afterwards, and someone had asked about like some process question, and I was like, I don't really know. And Jonathan was like, let me tell you how jenlee does things, which is so funny when your friends step in or not, like give the outside view. Yeah. And she's like, jenlee is like, maybe I think I want to make a movie. How about I go, first I need a camera. Okay, I'm going to buy a camera. Next, I need this. Okay, now I'm going to do this. And I didn't realize till she said that, but that's really just how it goes. Like I see, like I get one step ahead of me is what I can see. And then I take that step, and then usually another one appears. And it's like, okay, I can go buy a camera. Yeah. Okay, I can like, you know what I mean?
Oh, and, I totally know what you mean, yeah.
But but it opens you up for like serendipity in a way that I never could have like conceived of it in the end. Like when I made that movie, I was trying to make a 10-minute short film because it would have been crazy to me to think like I'm going to make a full-length movie. That's crazy. I was trying to make a 10-minute short, and I didn't realize until after it was all shot and I typed up the whole thing. And I counted the pages, and I was like, oh my God, I accidentally made an hour-long movie, Oh so it's just these
things. That was what happened with Indie Kindred, your first, yeah.
Yeah. And I never would have guessed, like if you'd asked me in the beginning, like I never would have guessed, like, that I'd ever get to connect with, like you and Winterbloom to work on that. So many things about it kind of would have surpassed anything I could have planned or imagined. Mm-hmm. But when you like leave enough openings for just to like take one step and be like, okay, well, my favorite group is playing at this show down the street from me. I'm just going to go. Well, maybe I'll just send them an email. see if they mind, tell them about the project. And then it's like, oh, cool. Then not only did I get to feature you in that film, but then I got to meet you and get to know you. And like, what a gift all of that is.
Right.
But you miss all that if you think that you have to like know before you start. And I just feel like some people work that way and it's a style, but it's just not the way I'm wired. I think my way is a lot more intuitive, and I think I just like to leave a lot more space for like some kind of invisible help, to be in the dance with me on it.
Yeah. Well, two things are striking me right now. One is I'm thinking like to get that email about like, I'm making a film or I'm making something, I don't know what it is. Do you want to be like, how disarming it would be to get that email? Like, she's making something, she doesn't know what it is. Am I in? Yeah, I'm in. Like, versus like people like, here's what it is. Like, is this a good fit for you? Like I find that what a wonderful invitation to get. The other thing I want to ask you, just because I'm wondering it, and I wonder if the people who will be listening will wonder it, is like when you're taking those little steps, like get the camera, that's the first step, and you don't have the end result in mind, but you're working towards something. How do you deal with the voice if it comes up like, this isn't worth it, or like this isn't going to work, or like just any of those voices? How do you just like kind of quiet them to take the next step?
Well, I think once I recruit a bunch of friends into it, then I feel like I can't quit. So like I really believe in it until everyone else says yes. Once everyone's on board, then I never believe in it again. And I'm like just racked with doubt the whole time. But I have to finish because I just roped everyone into it, Yeah. And everybody else can hold the belief in a certain way. But I think that's one thing. I think my producers who I'm working with now are just really good at reminding me every time something feels impossible, because I've felt like I've been up against impossible challenges, and they'll remind me, well, remember when the last part where you thought that was impossible? Remember when you were trying to plan the film shooting and you had all these people with all these schedules and you thought you'd never find a date where everyone could leave New York for the same 7-day window? And look, you found a way, And remember when the next part that felt totally impossible and you did it? And there's something about also, I think, letting people witness your journey and just remind you. It's like having people remind you like, oh yeah, you're always a little PMSy. Then you feel better the next day. It's just some kind of outside thing where you're like, oh, this is actually just part of my rhythm. Every time I do, prepare story to tell on stage, there's always this moment where I think, this will be the time I don't pull it together. This will be the time I can't do it. And it's almost like they tell people about with childbirth, like this moment where you're actually close to the end, where you most feel like giving up. And I think, oh, when I hit that moment, that means I'm really close. That means I'm 48 hours away from cracking the code.
Right.
Like, it's so close. Just hang in there. If you're ready to give up, you're almost there. Isn't that funny?
I that makes me want to cry. That feels so true. And the idea of like letting other people witness your journey and inviting those people in, not just for accountability, but so that they can remind you like, this is part of your process, or that's so beautiful. And I think such an important thing to cultivate if you can. Even if you're someone who normally writes alone, I think there are ways, you've found many ways. I'm sure sometimes you do work alone, but you have the podcast or the letters with Tim Manley, and then maybe even a podcast where it's two artists talking back and forth about what they're working on.
Yeah, I try to let people in as much as I can, and I feel like that's one thing that helps, is that people can remind you. And I think a lot about, I've been thinking of new ways to do this in the future. Like I'm thinking about doing some videotape, maybe even Friday, like in 2 days' time, of like recording part of my film editing process even. because I just feel like the process is a thing too. Like the process is a gift just as much as the end result is. Because I think everyone else who's in the midst of their process can just feel like less alone in it, like you were saying before.
Yeah.
And I just know that's all I need to know. I don't need anyone to like know the solution to the problem I'm working on. But if I just know someone else is out there trying, I'm like, okay, I'm not alone in the room. I think that's the thing. I don't like to feel alone in the room with things. And I'm doing very solitary work right now with some writing that I'm working on. And I still am like, I have friends that I check in with and I'm like, here's what I worked on today. Or I'll take a little picture of a piece I wrote of it, because I just don't want to be alone in the room with it.
Yeah.
That feels really lonely to me. And I have people who like, I want to sit with them in the room that they're in, whether that's what's happening with their creative work or the life transition they're in, or,
Yeah.
I feel like everything's tolerable as long as we don't feel alone in it,
Yeah, absolutely.
And just having like kind company, it's like all you really need,
I know, it's so true. How do you choose your people that you want to check in with?
How do I feel like I've always just kind of had this funny friend radar,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to describe it, how you like can just kind of feel who your people are.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's one piece of it, of just feeling like someone's a fit, or like with that team, I just felt like I haven't really talked to this woman before, but we've kind of known each other online, and I just have a feeling about her, and then it turns out usually to be pretty spot on. But I think I also look for people who have space, like people who just have space for me, where there can be some kind of reciprocity, where I feel like, oh, I'm not going to like infringe on you if I leave you this message. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately, actually. I was just telling a friend earlier today that it reminds me of those slot machines, like at Las Vegas or something.
Yeah.
When I think about all the things that really have to line up, like for friendship to kind of click, and it's like sometimes it's a stage of life piece that's lining up or not lining up, and sometimes it's an availability piece, like, oh, I'm available on the phone during the day, but they're only available in person at night. Like that's not a fit. So sometimes it's like people, there's a certain alignment of where we're at in our journeys is kind of like aligned, even if we're at a totally different life stage, and there's some kind of alignment with our availability where we're both willing to be available to meet in a certain way, and to give each other a certain kind of space. And yeah, I think that reciprocity thing is pretty big for me. I'm not always good at it, but I try to follow that rule where it's not like one person is, I don't know, it doesn't feel like an imbalanced seesaw.
Right.
I don't want somebody else to get swallowed up in my work. I want to connect with someone who's also like into their work too.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of these connections are like, it helps to just allow them to be seasonal and to be like, this was a companion that was brought to me for this moment in time, and I'm going to cherish them and enjoy it. And then maybe in another season, it flows in a different direction. We have different companions come along our way, like to allow there to be fluidity too, which is hard sometimes.
Yeah.
You wish you could just like hold on to people forever.
Keep on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But sometimes you just got to play with the people who want to play with you.
Yeah.
And I also just try to, I don't know how to describe some of that, like how when people are for you. But like even before we moved to Sweden, I was looking for new friends on Instagram. And it's like, I can find them. I can pick them out,
Wow.
And then we meet, and I'm like, of course, here you are, you know?
I love having that level of mindfulness around friendship. That's something that I've thought a lot about more recently. Or actually the word is maybe more like proactive. Because I feel like a lot of times you find yourself in these, like your kid's school, you know, like those are the people that are there. And maybe it's the parents of your kid's classmates. So those are the people that are there, but having this mindfulness of who is a good fit. So obviously that's not inherently a creative space, but it's not inherently not a creative space either.
Yeah, and I just think we need different types of people for different things. Like,
oh yeah,
I love having neighbors. Like, I love having people who I just bump into on the street, you know? And those don't feel less important to me because I'm like, oh, you're not a like creative kindred, you know?
Yeah.
I'm like, no, that's pretty sacred and holy to me too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we need a lot of different types of people, but I'm really grateful for people who will just journey alongside me like that.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you for talking. I haven't talked with anyone about friendship yet. I feel like we could do a whole show on that. But I know something else I want to ask you before I have you tell one story about something you made. If you have a few more minutes.
Yeah.
Have you ever uncovered like there's something about you? I haven't thought about this in a long time, but I think knowing that I was going to talk to you today, I remembered that I had this belief, I don't know where it came from, probably something when I was a kid, that like if something wasn't working out for me, if I was working on a song or trying to make something, there was this belief in the background that, well, if I were meant to do this, right? If I were meant to finish this, it would be easier. Or if like God wanted me to, or the universe wanted me to sing, I wouldn't like have a bad day of singing or have it, you know what I mean? Like that the world was not on my side. And that's such a funny belief to say out loud because it sounds absurd. But what I've noticed is that sometimes these beliefs are like in the background. So I can't even like engage them to be like, you're not true, but they're running back there. So it might be like, it might manifest like, you know, I'm writing something and I have an idea and I'm really excited about it. And then later I realize, oh no, actually I want to do it this way. And I throw that out and I do this. That belief in the background might say, well, you know, if, you know, you were so excited about that first idea, like, were you wrong? Like, can you not trust yourself? Like, why are you throwing that? Can you not trust the process? Because if the process were really pure, why would it take you through all these things that you eventually end up throwing out? Now, of course, I do this all the time. Like I'm changing stuff and I go through the process, but I find that I still have those sort of unhelpful tapes running. And yeah, I wonder if you do too and what you do about that.
Yeah, I think that's pretty common. I think it's like, it seems like a pretty common way for just the part of us that's afraid and that's trying to protect us from some future disappointment or danger. That's like, look out, be careful. You know, we have this kind of cautious voice.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think I just have to trick myself into believing things that are helpful for me to believe, and to not even hold them like the truth, but like to say like whatever stories I say to myself about it is made up, so I might as well make up something helpful. Like, hey, I wouldn't have gotten to this moment or this solution or this idea if I hadn't taken those 3 left turns, you know, or whatever. I have to kind of just write into the narrative, like, I only get to be this version of myself because I have all of this at my back. I mean, I can look at my 20s and be like, what the heck did I do? I lost a decade of my life. Like, I spent a decade, like, selling lipstick, like, what? where could I have been? You know, there was this way at first when I started doing creative work where I felt like almost like grief about like lost time or something. But the truth is something in me wasn't ready yet. And I hadn't uncovered any of those desires yet. You know, I didn't know I wanted to make movies until I moved to New York City and I walked down the street and I saw a flag for NYU Film School and I stopped dead in my tracks and just felt this like grief. Like, there was film school? No one told me there was film school.
Yeah.
And I had these 2 babies and I had this June Cleaver life and I was like, I missed it. It's too late. But I promise you, if I'd been a senior in high school and I told somebody I wanted to make movies, they would have helped me figure that out. But that was like not even a conscious desire before that moment.
Right.
So I feel like it's more helpful just to say to ourselves, like, it's a mystery. Like, our journeys are kind of mysterious and we get there the only way we can. And whatever force is trying to get us to where we're going is nudging us along, and we'll get there in the end, you know. I feel like I just am like, whatever I'm saying to myself that's making me feel discouraged is made up. So how about I just make up something that makes me feel like there's nothing wrong here. You're right on time. You're right on schedule. Like today when I was really tired, I was like, of course you're tired. Let's just review the last 7 months of your life. I think you're due a date to lay down and watch Netflix. It's going to be fine, you know?
Yeah.
But it's like, what? You know, we feel this panic when things aren't going the way we think they should. But I think that helps.
Yeah, and in that you are your own kind company.
Yes, and I'm trying to learn that more and more. And the people who've come alongside me, who've been such kind voices to me, I try to listen to the way they speak to me and internalize that so I can speak to myself that way.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like they're teaching me how to say, like, oh, of course you feel that way. Of course. And like to make it feel like this is normal. This isn't a problem. You'll get there. Keep going. Take care. You know, it's just like very, very basic, soothing things. But it's like, oh, I could actually learn to just speak that way to myself.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like my new next developmental step I'm trying to take.
Yeah.
Is to try to become a good friend to myself.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like there's a way in which I think a part of me is trying to help me by saying there's a problem here, you know, to like get everyone's attention, to be like, oh, you're not going to finish this project unless we freak out, you know, don't forget, you know, whereas this other one is like, it's going to happen.
It's like this version of Anne that's standing off in the corner with a clipboard. That's like, excuse me, attention.
Yes, yeah.
Right here on the clipboard, where you're like, no, actually, you're not the helpful voice.
Well, what I've realized as an adult is that I think that she came out of that. Actually, I'm like super type B and I'm really super slow. And I married someone who moves slowly in the world, and I love that about him. But when we go on vacation, we discover that I actually even move more slowly than him. And he's like, are you ready? And so it makes sense to me that I would have this manager like, come on, you know, like this is, you know, just in having to get to school in the morning as a kid, or just any of the things that we were required to do.
Yeah.
That we didn't really
you get this part that like cracks the whip.
Yeah.
It's like, and you have to be able to function in the world because, you know, sometimes there's a court date and you have to be there.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So it's like nice to let those people, but to learn like where their domain is. And to be like, I'll let you be really uptight about what we're having for dinner tonight, but for the next hour while I'm writing, I just need you to like go on holiday.
Right. You can be in charge of driving the car, but you're not in charge of playing the song.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to be respectful of your time and everyone listening. So if you are willing to share a story of a specific story of how something you made came to be.
Yeah, I think one thing that was maybe one of the last things I made that was like such a surprise to me was on my last documentary, which is called Bright Lights. It was the first time I was doing a film that was about people who are telling true stories from their life on stage in New York City. And so, when the dream is, I like the documentaries I really love. I love documentaries about musicians because there's like this beautiful, like built-in soundtrack to them. But with story, it was kind of a challenge because there's no, kind of like built-in natural soundtrack to that. And it was also a really personal story for me and a real personal look inside the story of the friendships that I made inside that community in New York. And so when it came time to look at music, and there's a lot of like great resources now that help filmmakers partner with musicians. And I know more of those now. And I use them. I have friends who are musicians whose music I really love. But I feel like with this one particular story, I felt was having an efficiency problem, like because there was something that felt inefficient to me about listening for hours to try to find the thing that felt right when I already knew how it felt. I was like, I could feel in my body the emotion of it, and it felt exhausting to me to just like spend 4 hours to find one 60-second clip and then have a whole hour of a film that I'm trying to score this way, And so I had this like Korg keyboard that I'd bought in my former life back before I did creative work, back in Denver. And I bought it used at a Guitar Center. And it was one of the things I had the most buyer's remorse of anything I'd bought in my life, where after the fact, I was just like, what was I thinking? Like, why did I buy that? But I had it in my apartment, and I just asked my husband, and I was like, there's got to be a way to like plug this into a laptop. There's just got to be a way to do it. Mm-hmm. I tried to just record something with it with a microphone, and Brooklyn is so noisy. It's ridiculous. Like there are fire trucks going down the street. My children are like pitter-pattering through the room. And my husband, it was just really funny. He was like looking at it, and he goes, I think I have this cable from this rock band guitar video game. Where you buy like the plastic guitar, play the video game. So he pulled it out, and he did. Yeah. He had this cable that like went from the Korg keyboard USB into the laptop. And I was like, tried it out, and I was like, that's kind of amazing. There's no room noise. My kids can be going nuts in the background. It's not like messing up the recording. And so I just started like every day. It was that thing where you're like, you feel it out there. And I was like, I'm just going to sit down at this keyboard and feel my feelings and move a little bit, and then hit record and just see what I come up with. And I ended up writing, like scoring the whole movie that way. And by the end, when I went to edit it, I had, like 12 or 14 tracks. I don't have any of it written down. And like, I've never taken a composition class. I have no idea what I'm doing. Yeah. I tried at one point to just write things down so I could recreate them, but it just felt like it was taking too long. I mean, I was literally just recording it as it came out. And I went to edit it, and it was just like, there was just the right piece for each moment. And they just like dropped right in like puzzle pieces. And there was the music for the film.
It's so magical.
And it's so funny because there's this way we can make ourselves feel like illegitimate. Like, who the hell am I? Like, I've never learned how to write a song, I've never, but I knew how that felt to me, that season. And then when the movie premiered in April in New York City, it premiered at the Manhattan Film Festival. And I got to sit in this theater and watch it play. And there was a woman from the storytelling scene there who I really love. And she's like in her 60s. And she was sitting right in front of me, and she didn't know I was behind her. It was like the best seat in the house, because the movie started, and she was like, oh, it's beautiful. Like, she couldn't stop like talking out loud. And then the first song queued up, and she was like, oh, and the music. And everything in my body relaxed, and I was like, it's going to be okay. But I just heard it play in this movie theater, and I was so surprised, because you make these things in your living room with some cable from your husband's like video game. But then you're like in this movie theater, and you're like, oh my gosh, it looks like a real movie, you guys. It sounds like a real movie. When I got into the festival, I was like, oh my gosh, I like tricked them. They think I'm like a real filmmaker. They think this is a real thing. They don't know I just made it in my living room while my kids were like freaking out in the background. You know? It was just really, really funny. So that was the first time where I just ended up like writing the whole thing, and it feels like my heart. I don't know. It's like, I think that's what I'm doing with my films. I'm trying to bring people inside my heart and give them like some tour of some room there, you know, and like, here are the people who live here, and here's how it looks, and here's how it sounds. And I love that medium because it gives you so many layers to do that with, like color and light and movement and words and people saying their story in their own voice, and then music, you know. It's the closest I can get.
That is so
It's the closest I can get.
Is there any way that we can see the film, or not yet?
It's not out online yet because it's still making the rounds at the festival. So it'll be playing at the Adirondack Film Festival in New York next month.
Okay.
In October. And once it's done at the festivals, then I'll release it digitally.
Okay, so if you're not on jenlee's mailing list, you can go to jenlee.net, jenlee.net, and then we'll hear about that when it comes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
Oh, I cannot wait to see that film.
I'm like, oh God, all the real musicians will be able to hear all the mistakes in this.
Well, I'll tell you, just, you know, I don't know if you know my album Blazing Red, but I had this vision of how I wanted the cover to look. And I kept communicating with artists like through the mail. You know, I'd send a little like sketch, like, I think I kind of wanted to look like this. Mm-hmm. And then they'd send back something amazing, like that I could never do. But I'd be like, that doesn't quite feel right, even though it's amazing, right? I did that with a bunch of different artists. And each time I would try to kind of get better at the sketch and have it more encapsulate like this certain feeling of kind of like, well, I can't remember the words of how I would describe how she was, but it was sort of like, the original title was going to be My Only Way Out Is In, and that's not the title, but that was sort of what I wanted the drawing to feel like, and have it have white in the back. And as I was going through this process by like the fifth person, I was like, one day I looked at it, I'm like, this is actually it. Like, this is the drawing. I'm just going to use this. I just did the drawing. Like,
that's amazing. I love that so much.
I don't know how to draw, and then I did the drawing on the side. I'm like, okay, I just did the artwork.
Perfect.
I don't know how, but there it is.
I love that.
Yeah. So your story reminds me of that, but yeah.
Well, and that song in particular of yours, My Only Way Out Is In, I've been listening to a lot in this season. So I want you to know it's like part of the soundtrack getting me through. Oh. And I've been thinking about that a lot.
I can't wait to share new music with you. I want to have
me either.
Conversation. Yeah. So in wrapping up, is if there's one thing you could say to makers, songwriters, writers, what, you know, as a thing to remember, as a little inspiration, what would it be?
Gosh, I just feel like the thing I'm saying to myself over and over these days is just keep going. I just keep saying it to myself, like, keep going, keep going, keep going. You know, hard season, dark days. I feel like the only way is just to keep going, you know?
Cool. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you. It was really lovely to talk to you today.
I adore you. Okay. Until next time.
Okay.
Thanks so much for joining us. If you know someone who would enjoy or benefit from this podcast, please share it with them. Thanks so much. Much love.